Hello, this is Saul Luckman. It's my pleasure to welcome you to Conversations on Saul Luckman Uncensored, sponsored by snooze2awaken.com, resources for lucidity. For more information about my work, including a lot of fantastic free content, check out crowrising.com. I'm also now on Telegram, where I'm sharing daily truth bombs at t.me/Saul Luckman. Today, for the first time, I have the great honor of interviewing my longtime friend and colleague, author Brendan Murphy, whose freedom-inspiring and thought-provoking work you should definitely check out at brendandmurphy.com. A self-described truth addict, Brendan is the co-founder of the Truth, T-R-O-O-T-H, social network, as well as the host of the Truthiverse podcast. His acclaimed nonfiction epic, The Grand Illusion, A Synthesis of Science and Spirituality, is regarded as essential reading by many students of the physical and metaphysical sciences, yours truly included. In addition to collaborating on a pandemic spoof video that YouTube actually banned, titled How the Deep State Stole Christmas with Brendan, I've had the great pleasure of publishing a number of his brilliant articles on my blog. Some of the juicier titles, to which I'll provide links in the show notes, include 5 historical vaccine scandals suppressed by the establishment, cognitive dissonance, conditioning, and reality creation, killing ourselves to flatten the COVID curve, why scientific peer review is a sham, especially in medicine, why you should not trust medical experts, a bridge to the mystical, the entanglement of physics and mysticism, 432 DNA tuning and the Naziization of music, and finally, junk DNA, doorway to transformation. Thanks for joining me today, Brendan. In the aftermath of your daring escape from Australia, a subject I very much want to discuss, how the hell are you?
Oh, well, I'm pretty good. I'm pretty good, man. Thank you for having me on. It's it's been a long time coming, and it's good to make it happen.
All right, yeah. I mean, you took the leap into the podcastiverse before I did, and you've been doing very well. And I thought, heck, if Brendan can do it, maybe I can do it half as good. So here we are. So where are you exactly? I mean, if that's not like confidential information, and you're not being hunted down by Australian authorities.
Not that I'm aware of. We're in the state of Jalisco in Mexico these days.
I know it well. Are you anywhere near the beach, or are you back towards the interior?
We're not coastal. No, we're more inland.
So how did you get there? Because, one day you were in Australia and the next you weren't. There they are. It's the authorities. They're coming after you.
It's a knock at the door. Excuse me. Yeah, well, how did we get here? How much of a backstory do you want? I just want the logistics of the transport situation.
Well, I heard little drips and drabs as you went through that process. I mean, what inspired you to leave? I mean, maybe that's obvious, but what was your personal experience of that? If you could briefly share that, and then walk us through how it happened, because it seems like it was a difficult thing to pull off, and then maybe bring us up to date.
Yeah, so basically, fair enough. We were, I don't know, somewhere in 2021, I think, maybe 2020. And, we were just sort of, I never really felt like the area we were living in was sort of, going to be our forever kind of place. But we were looking around at the landscape, and I just sort of said to Amy one day, if this insanity is going to carry on for too much longer, I don't know if I'm down for hanging around for it. So it was like pretty relatively early on in this hoax that I was sort of like, yeah, this is not right. People have lost their minds in Australia, and there was just way too much compliance and fear and paranoia, and so in the end we sort of let it simmer for some months, and then somewhere in, I don't know, it might have been October or somewhere thereabouts of last year, we decided to pull the trigger on it, maybe a little bit earlier. But then, you got a 1-year-old or a toddler who's heading towards one, and
I'm losing you a little bit there. I don't know if you can hear me. I was having some internet problems earlier, so if it's me, I apologize. Let's see here. Let me see. You froze up. I don't know what to do when that happens. Are you there?
Oh, yes, I'm back.
Okay, great. Yeah, you froze up, and I don't know if it's you or me because I was having some internet problems earlier. So,
Okay.
I don't know where you were. You were talking about having a child. You had that going on, and part of your decision-making process, I suppose.
Yeah. So, yeah, even though we had her, and it was like, well, I mean, I guess in a way, it's a good age to sort of move because they're too young to have any like attachments to, friends or that kind of thing. I might not even have any friends as such. And they're just basically, they're around you 24/7. So, yeah, we packed up our stuff in a mad rush and got out because when we were in the process of selling our stuff and packing, they started talking about the moronic strain, and we just sort of went, okay, here we go. We can see the writing on the wall here, and they started talking in the media. They were trumping up this sort of COVID hype around our area, the specific region we actually lived in, and they were trying to target it and create a fear campaign around what I like to call Cooties 19, and try to rally, sort of boost, basically scare people into going and lining up for the pointy thing, right?
Is this the Byron Bay area?
That's the Byron Bay area, and so the rates for jabs around there are famously low. They're actually nearby in surrounding areas of a town, a little country town called Mullumbimby, which has apparently the nation's lowest jab rates. So it's sort of kind of a good area. It's like
Strangely, the highest health rates.
Yeah, what a coincidence, right? Amazing. Yeah, so we could go off on that tangent, but that was sort of the writing on the wall. We were like, oh shit, we have to go now. Like we can't sort of hang around. We got to do this.
Yeah, we got this email, this kind of like spy email from you that was like, okay, we're absconding, we're leaving the country in like a day or a week or something crazy like that. It would just sort of hit us like out of nowhere.
Yeah. It was great. It was absolutely nuts. Like if it wasn't for our nanny, who's also one of our best friends, like she was there at the house after we left, trying to sell the couches for us while we were gone, which she did. So if it wasn't for the help that we had, we would have been in a bit of a tight situation. But yeah, so it was a 70. I think it was 70.
We're cutting out again. I have this nice still shot of you. Very, very happy looking photo. Let's see if you come back around. Oh, this reminds me of Mexico. Are you there now?
I'm back.
Yeah. I was not, it had this really nice smile on your face where you froze. You look like now it's now the do you have your microphone on?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I do. Yeah.
You're not having any issues, are you? Yeah, I did. Are we having any internet issues that you know of?
No, have you got your thing on?
Yeah. I think it might be. Maybe it's on your end, so
It's possible. I mean, it's weird because I almost never have that, and then I was having that earlier. So anyway.
Must be one of those days.
All right. Yeah, it's something, the Archons definitely interfering with us.
And they're out to get us, man.
They really are. So yeah, did you hop a commercial flight or what was that like?
Yeah, we just flew normal what do you call it? Standard, yeah, commercial.
All right. So that wasn't an issue because I was under the impression that wasn't so easy to do, to actually leave the country.
Well, yeah, at the time you had to apply to our loving overlords for a travel exemption to leave the country. Which, it's you basically send a one-page letter to the department, and there's someone's there, some poor soul sitting at the computer having to read this rubbish that people are sending in, these applications. And we just
I'm wanting to go to Mexico and become a coyote. Is that I'm really wanting to help the border situation in the United States.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. So
I think that's cool. That's great. Go, please. We need all the fascism and tyranny we can get.
Yeah. They were probably glad to see us go. Like it helps the ratio of the bootlickers to the freedom lovers. So
Yeah, you're worth
Yeah.
about 1,000 of the bootlickers, So that was, you really shifted the balance.
I like to think so. Thanks for that. Yeah. So we ended up, we made it here in, when was it? In the very early days of December, last December. So we haven't been here that long, but we're starting to sort of find our Mexico groove now.
And then you had sort of some classic, I don't know, some bumps upon entry. You had a little bit of food poisoning and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that was not good. But
and then you actually got your apartment was robbed, and you lost some of the books that you brought. Weren't you working on the sequel to The Grand Illusion, and you had some reference books with you and that sort of thing?
I've lost a few books that were unfortunately for the purposes of research and writing, which is annoying. So I'll have to track them down again. The last copy,
laptops, right?
Yeah, I don't know, man. They're after my stuff. Yeah, I literally had one copy left of The Grand Illusion, which I was going to use as a reference for editing and revising it, and that's gone. So I have to order my own book again, which is annoying.
Oh, that's funny. I've been there. I've definitely been there. That's very funny. How far are you into the sequel, and what's the title? If you could give us maybe a sneak peek, or do you have a working title for that?
I've been toying with different ideas for the title. I mean, it is the sequel of book one, so it's going to be something The Grand Illusion book two, and there might be a sort of more specific title or subtitle to clarify what it's talking about, which is very heavily focused on afterlife research. So yes, that's it's really, I just need to knuckle down and spend a couple of months kind of just editing, because it's already way too big. It's already significantly bigger than the first volume, which was already huge. So I've kind of got to cut back, I think, which is going to be the challenge.
Right. You ever think just look at yourself in the mirror and say, I have a writing problem?
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to stop once you start, man. I'm sure you can relate, because you've got the knack as well.
Yeah, it's more like an illness or something. Sometimes it's like, it gets in your head and you can't move forward without getting it out of your head. I like to just download it and then I totally forget what I wrote.
Oh yeah. I like to joke that the reason I write it down is so I don't have to remember.
Right, exactly. It's there, I can go look it up if I need to.
Yeah. Please just refer to my book.
Yes. So if you don't mind, give us a little bit of information, since we're on this topic, about the afterlife and the research that you've discovered. What is your, if you could condense your take on what it is and how it works, how would you go about doing that?
Well, that's a huge question. What the afterlife is and how it works.
Based on your research, I mean, how are you presenting it in this this voluminous package that you're working with here, this new book?
Well, I've kind of followed the format of book one in the sense of breaking, like the chapters are kind of sequential in terms of the subject matter that they tackle, and it kind of has that kind of progression of like in book one, I kind of had it in mind that I would be able to communicate with people who were maybe sort of neophytes, so to speak, as well as people who were veterans, and maybe people who were a little bit skeptical but wanted the facts, kind of thing. And so I structured it in a way that it became more and more progressively more kind of woo and out there. So it continues in that vein, and I've just basically it's a lot of books on the subject are basically like collections of stories and like anecdotes, which is good, and we need that information. I've just taken it and layered it more in terms of like a scientific perspective, more detail, like a mythological, symbolic, religious kind of analysis, as opposed to just having a collection of stories. So I'm in the detailed analysis of looking at it through the eyes of the hypnotherapists who are doing past life regressions, looking at it through the eyes of the children who have spontaneous organic past life recall, and there's just so much stuff. It's just massive.
So what are the most compelling 2 or 3 examples supporting the concept of an afterlife from the research, from those types of situations, whether that's hypnosis or spontaneous recall in children or something else?
It's so funny that you asked me that question, put me on the spot, and it's like, I know so many examples, but to actually think of them.
Yeah, well, maybe it'll come to you, I know we didn't rehearse any of this, so that's absolutely fine. Maybe something will come to mind. I know I started reading on this topic some years ago, and I'm forgetting the authors' names now, but there was somebody who did a lot of studies in India having to do with children in India who recalled past lives situations, who had weird birthmarks that lined up, who, they discovered photographs of these kids, and it's just the exact same person. It's amazing.
Mm. Yeah. It sounds like you're talking about Ian Stevenson.
Yes, Ian Stevenson. That's right.
Yeah. I mean, he's the guru. He's the the godfather of all this. Like, he collected so many cases like what you just described, and it's I mean, if you look at his material, it's like, well, I mean, do we have a better explanation than reincarnation for this? It doesn't really look like it. Like, if you want to go to a lower, I don't know, downgrade it, in terms of the woo factor, you have to still invoke like some kind of psi, collective unconscious or whatever it may be. And he pulled out so many of those stories where these kids were born, and when they were like 4 years old or 5 years old, they started talking about this family that was in a town or a village, not that far away, but, and they would say the names of relatives, the names of people they believed were their family, but they would talk about it in present tense, like, this is the name of my dad, and their family would be like, what's happening here? What's going on? And they'd provide the names of other people, members of the family. And so, yeah, Stevenson, what he did was to go and track it down. He treated it like a detective would, and he interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people and got thousands of pages worth of research material and affidavits and things, documents signed by people, and swearing that this is true and accurate and all this kind of thing. And it was like case after case after case where these kids were giving verifiable information about families they had absolutely no business in knowing about, but they had a really palpable emotional attachment to these families they'd never met before. And when they would finally meet them, they'd be taken to meet them if their biological parents were open to it, which in India they frequently were. They would often become really emotional and maybe get super attached and emotionally involved with these families. And sometimes they would sort of adopt them because they would say things that the only explanation that made sense to them was, well, you are the reincarnation of our child who's just died, 6 months or a year ago or a couple of years ago. And this is what makes sense. Like, you seem to be the reincarnation of this soul that we lost. And so, yeah, many, many cases just like that. It's quite unbelievable.
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, as you mentioned, in that culture, there was a receptivity to the concept. It's difficult to imagine a study along those lines happening in a lot of Western countries, although that might be changing as people get more and more open to things. But he absolutely picked the right place. And yeah, it was just story after story, just copious amounts of evidence that we're either dealing with an actual biological reincarnation or some kind of memory storage in the morphic field that people are tapping into and maybe misinterpreting it or something like that.
Yeah.
Either case, like you said, you're dealing with some kind of very strange phenomenon.
Yeah, like there's no way around it. If you're a rational person, you have to concede that at the very least there's some kind of information storage happening that people can then tap into. But the interesting thing about it is, it's like, well, you have to ask why, and like, why is this child so emotionally invested and involved in this? Like, why is it having such an impact? Like, it's so personal, and it's those types of elements make you sort of think twice well, at least as far as I'm concerned, they make you think twice about just trying to reduce it to oh, well, you're just picking up this information that's stored in the field, which everything, all the information is stored in the field, but why is it picked up by this one child and not all these other people who could potentially tune into it? And why is it playing out the way that it is if it's just an information storage thing that could be, it's like when people clairvoyance and things tap into an object, hold an object, and then they can read the object and the information that's stored in it, and they can read its history and all this kind of thing, like psychometry. So I think it's something more than that. I do, it's like, it's tough because our brains work in terms of like linear time, and we conceptualize in terms of linear time, and that's valid on one level, but then there's the other levels where it sort of breaks down and linear time doesn't really work. So I take a reincarnationist view, but with a little asterisk next to it saying, it's it's not quite that simple.
Oh, right. So immersing yourself in this research, has that, I don't know, given you any kind of peace of mind about the death and dying process, or the fact that, this is what happens? A lot of people, when they discover Jesus or whatever, they're suddenly, more comfortable with that phenomenon. Have you experienced anything like that encountering this research? And let me add to that question. Would readers of this book might be comforted knowing that this is a possible reality?
Yeah, I mean, massively. I mean, I don't see how you could make it to the end of it and not be altered by it.
Right.
Even as someone who's familiar with a lot of that material. And yeah, like it is for me, like I always have a level, there's a part of me that's the skeptic, which is always there in the background, doubting and critiquing things and trying to dismantle them. And this kind of information and doing this kind of study over years is even for someone who's had like mystical experiences and things, and one or two quick little out of body type episodes, it is still, it helps to counteract that little skeptic chirping away, on your shoulder, and it does have that reassuring effect. I think a lot of people will find that when they do get their hands on it.
Yeah, I really look forward to it. I mean, the first book was so mind-blowing and expansive, and it went into so many different topics and territories. It sounds like this book is a little more focused on a single subject. Is that fair to say?
Slightly. I
know you have a tendency to weave things. Your mind is very holistic, and so you're constantly weaving in additional information into the storyline, the narrative. But I'm wondering if it has a little bit more of a central focus.
It is, in terms of I guess the focus of this book, which is technically the second half of the same book but separate volume. Its focus is more on discarnate reality. So that's the thread that weaves through it more so. And it's going to be something that I'm quite confident that it will be, even though it is covering subjects that have been talked about for a long time by a lot of different people, it's going to be, I think I've dealt with it in a way that no one else really has.
Yeah, that's exciting. That's really exciting. And it's very, very timely, because we're up against such a cult of death right now. And people are so terrified of dying, and that's being leveraged against individuals and the collective in a way that I just didn't even think was possible, frankly. So I think, this book is really timely and could be extremely helpful in rolling back the tide of some of this just freakish paranoia.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. I mean, I'd love to see that as a result. I mean, because you can't, one thing I'm sure you've seen this over the last 2 years is we're not really winning any battles by directly tackling the hoax and in terms of reaching those people who are scared. So this is a more indirect way of helping them to sort of not be so afraid of that, that big event at the end of the little performance.
Yeah, and also just the idea that we are so much more than this body and this personality, obviously that's that's one of the key elements of genuine spirituality. So you're tapping into something that's really fundamental to, I believe, the awakening and the growth process for, us humans on this spiritual journey, right?
Yeah, man. And I don't know about you, but when like the order of or the stages of the awakening for me, and I've found out that this has been the case for a lot of people, is it first for me it started with the spiritual awakening, and that grounded in that truth. And then because when you have that, your sense of identity becomes so much more expanded, then you can go into places and deal with subjects that you might not be that well equipped to deal with. So then you can start going into like the really dark, horrible rabbit holes and stuff. But that spiritual grounding I've found is really key. And it's it's, as you mentioned, it's really missing. And we have we still have the mainstream religions and stuff, but they've become less and less relevant over the last few centuries. So we need a like a mentality that's not strictly scientific, or not a scientistic kind of mentality, and not simply an orthodox religious mentality, because we need something more now. Like we're trying to evolve, and we need to evolve a perspective that kind of matches the stage that we're at, I think.
Yeah, I like that. I like the way you said it. I was listening to an interview with Jason Shirka. Are you familiar with him? He's a ufologist, exopolitics guy. He's written at least one book. Anyway, it's not someone I'm super familiar with. I just happened to catch some of an interview based on this, alleged whistleblower having to do with, exopolitics and other related things. And Jason was pointing out that really spirituality is so much older than religion, and even the term New Age, if you wanted to be honest about it, should apply to religion, because religion came after spirituality. And I thought, that's really an excellent point.
Yeah, and like people see the religion, particularly Christianity. Christianity is like like programming people into a hypnotic state that they can't. They put these blinkers on, and then they can't see anything else outside of the canon, the dogma. But like you said, human history is, how many millions of years have humans been walking on this earth in some form or another as, bipedal creatures with, a relatively higher level of intelligence? Like, we've got so much evidence that takes us back, and this is very obscure and not well known in the mainstream at all, because it's shoved under the rug intentionally and suppressed. But, we've got evidence that modern, like anatomically modern humans existed and were walking around the earth hundreds of millions of years ago, not just 1 or 2 million years ago. So it's like Christianity showed up 2 millennia ago. I mean, that is New Age if you look at the grand scheme of things. It's cobbled together from all these different older, much more ancient sources. They're taking from the Hindu system. They're taking from all sorts of stuff that what's the word they like to throw around? I'm having a mental blank now. The religion, the nature religions that were there for millennia before Christianity was
like Gnosticism or the Gnostics or paganism.
Yeah, the Gnostics, but did you say pagans? That's the word I was looking for.
Pagan, right?
Yeah, like all this pagan stuff, and they've cobbled it all together and called it, the book of truth, the one and only truth, and it's just, it's massive plagiarism and just. Yeah, so it's but it's strange the way it hypnotizes people, and I don't think I've seen any kind of belief, at least none of the orthodox belief systems like that do induce people into that kind of such a rigid hypnotic state that they can't have any thoughts of their own or have any kind of critical thinking or whatever what have you. So yes, big picture, it's like, man, that's 2,000 years is the blink of an eye, and this is. We've been around a lot longer than that. We've been having spiritual experiences for a lot longer than that. And our state of consciousness has been evolving and changing. And, humans who were around 5,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, they didn't have a conscious experience like we have now. Like the actual sort of, the state of subjective awareness has apparently shifted over time. And now we have more than ever, we have a higher level of capacity to actually conceptualize what it means to be aware and to be conscious and to have consciousness and all this kind of thing. And when when particularly Christianity was being formulated, the consciousness and the way the brain to soul interface, if you want to call it that, worked was evidently quite different. Like if you look at the work that Julian Jaynes did in the what's it called, the origin of consciousness in the breakdown of the bicameral mind, he showed that we did not have the same type of interior experience back then, and it's evolved and shifted. And so the guys who were having experience, like visionary type experiences back then, were not able to conceptualize what was happening to them the way that we can now conceptualize it. So if they say, God contacted me or whatever, then that was as far as it went. It was like, well, okay, you've literally just been in contact with the creator of all things. And we've come a long way since then, and the nature of the mind has actually changed since then. So now we should be in a position, and we are in a position, to actually take a more meta perspective on this stuff and reanalyze it and look at it in a more holistic way, in a more historical way, in a scientific way, and pull it all together and say, hey, like, what's actually going on here? And I'm not happy at all with like just settling for the ancient aliens thing as well, because if you read Jaynes, you have a whole different perspective on that side of it too.
Yeah, say more about that. And this is fascinating. This is really great stuff. So carry on.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he basically showed that there was a by analyzing ancient texts, that there was a way that the mind processed awareness and experience that is no longer functioning. And I think it started to change. Now I'm testing my memory here. I need to go through this book again.
But it was stolen.
Hey?
But it was stolen.
No, that was one of the ones that wasn't, thank God. So I can still work with that. And yeah, basically, I think it was, it might have been, where are we? In the, don't quote me on this, okay? I'm testing my memory here, but in the, say, 1500 years or maybe 500 years BC, somewhere in that ballpark leading up to, the year zero, was kind of when this radical sort of shift in awareness started to happen. And the state of subjectivity in mankind was actually shifting away from this kind of archaic structure that most men and women still lived in and experienced. But then you started having these other people, these mutants who were different, and you start getting your types of more sophisticated, more meta type individuals coming through.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah, I hope I can answer it.
Well, I just want to interject, because where does that line up with the origins of Judaism?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, that's I think that's a very relevant time frame. So
because the reason I ask is that John Lash, in Not in His Image, discussed how the human mind did change via the introduction of the patriarchal religions, starting with Judaism. And he said that was the kind of initial seed for this archontification of the human mind. And then that became kind of a disease state in Christianity. And then it metastasized into Islam. And that's his language. That's his language.
Mm.
And so the way he interprets what you're describing with the changing of the bicameral mind is that this is a kind of archontic insertion of elements of their consciousness via the religious vector. And it's designed to change our perception from a holistic, nature-oriented perspective to an artificial simulacrum type of perspective on everything, where everything becomes a kind of simulation and a computer program. And ultimately we become transhuman when we become essentially biological computers. Now, I wrote about this in my book, Kali the Destroyer. So this is a subject that's near and dear to my heart in many ways, but I've been fascinated by the Lashian/Gnostic perspective on this change as something that may not be a positive thing, even though it appears more, quote unquote, to use your word, sophisticated.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've been trying to, as we've been speaking, trying to activate my memory here of Lash's material, and there's some really, really important stuff. And I know I'm probably forgetting most of it, but one of the crucial things was that back in before this shift started to happen, men had an experience of consciousness where if in terms of volition and will, if somebody willed something, they didn't experience it the way that we experience our intention or our volition. It's like, we know, we're familiar with our way of thinking and experiencing things, and like, I'm going to get up out of my chair and go and grab a glass of water, and that's like the thought process. We have an intention about it. Maybe we have a gurgling stomach telling us, we're hungry, so we go, okay, I'm going to go grab some food or whatever. But they had, if you go back far enough, they had an experience of not their own internal consciousness having the idea. It was experienced as an external source. It was experienced as what they would call a god, or whatever they particularly labeled it as in whatever culture they were in. But they might call it a god or a muse or something like this.
They would call it, they would think of it as the earth or the goddess. And he was making the point that these early shamanic cultures worldwide were using different technologies, often plant-based, spirit medicine-based types of technologies, to have a direct communion with the goddess. And so they didn't think they were necessarily in touch with the creator in some larger sense. Very often they thought they were actually having an experience of Mother Nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's right. And that's a whole, the whole Gnostic mythology and experience there. That's a really interesting.
Well, but just to clarify where Lash is coming from, whether he's right or not is a different question. But he was saying that what we call Gnostic is very limited geographically, but he's making the case that these early shamanic cultures all over the world were having similar experiences of the goddess, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. And that's probably true. So what James was showing was that our experience in whether you're taking plant medicine or not, or like even if you take all the sort of shamanic stuff away, we were just intrinsically different, and we would experience like it was commonplace and ordinary for you to hear the voice of a god or the god, if you interpret it like that, and to experience the commands that you hear, that you heard being given to you, to experience them as an externally generated thing, when it was actually, what he was saying was, it was actually their own volition, but it was sort of like dissociated. So they weren't really experiencing their volition as an internal phenomenon. It was as if it was projected externally at them, and they were being commanded by a god or an entity to do something. And so they, as a puny human, they felt compelled to do it. They didn't feel like they had a choice as such, which I found really interesting.
Fascinating. That really is.
Yeah, it is. And eventually that faculty, that mode of consciousness went away. We evolved into something slightly different. And so here we are.
Right. Or we devolved. I mean, that's because we have this twin program of religion and quote unquote science, that it seems like a massive program designed to pull the wool over our eyes, our collective eyes, in terms of who we really are, what our natural environment is, what our planet is, our relationship to it, our relationship to each other, and our relationship to the cosmos. Everything is being put through a kind of lens that I can't help thinking is a kind of archontic lens. And speaking of metastasis, we're seeing, this cancerous growth of the archontic mind in our hive-like culture right now. It's very disturbing. And I was wondering, taking this back to the reincarnation discussion, there are people who write about archons or do podcasts about archons. And if you don't know what an archon is, I mean, it's a complex subject, but the Gnostic view of archons, as interpreted by John Lash, is that they are extraterrestrial beings that are sort of half biological, half cyborg, perhaps, and they control humanity by using a kind of mental parasite action where they're actually like thought controllers or manipulators, and their gift if you want to call it that, is the ability to use illusion or simulacrum to create the appearance of reality or the appearance of something natural, whereas it's actually archontified and artificial. So that would be the ultimate in this. If this is true, that is who the enemy, quote unquote, is of humanity. So it's not really people on this planet who might be doing the bidding of the Archons. The ultimate enemy or the ultimate adversary, which may ultimately be a kind of beneficial catalyst to our evolution, would be the Archons. So you have a lot of people out there in YouTube land and podcast Alangia who are, describing the Archons in a lot of different ways. And one of the I don't know, meme or stories you hear is that they're really the ones that control our reincarnation. And if you walk towards the light, then you're just giving yourself over to a reincarnation into this matrix reality, as opposed to being able to exit it somehow. I have no idea what I think about that, but that's a pretty common story. Have you heard that? And what do you think about it if you have?
Yeah, I started seeing that stuff years ago, and there was the whole like reverse speech thing, where they were playing people's, important people's, famous people's speeches, like presidents and stuff, backwards, and they were deriving, the true message, so to speak, as they saw it from their reversed speech. But the thing about, there's two things I want to say. Firstly, just quickly, the idea of, that whole, like, don't go into the light because you're going to be parasitized by the Archons and you'll be, all this, that kind of thing. Like this is a prison and the reincarnation's a trap and all that kind of stuff. After being in this realm, doing this study for, at least 18 years now, there isn't really any credible, I hesitate to use the word evidence because that kind of connotes something tangible or solid, but there's not really a lot of logic or evidence to back it in terms of the available information out there. It's like the second part of my response to it is that, aside from saying that we can't really sort of support that in terms of the available evidence, and we have massive amounts of information out here, and then there's that sort of subset of people who think that this is what's happening with the don't go into the light people. But firstly, from where I stand, spending a lot of time here, that appears to be quite wrong. And I say that just as someone who's just been interested in whatever the hell the truth happens to be. And, I've just been doing this for a long time. But the second part of it is there is this sort of, in the collective consciousness, there's like a layer of, I don't know, you can conceptualize it almost like an astral layer or something, some kind of astral fantasia, a fantasy bubble of the collective that we're all kind of in the collective, but we can tap into this. And it's like, if you tap into it, say clairvoyantly, you can see, you can go and find Santa Claus out in a remote viewing session out in the astral planes. You can find Superman out, having an out-of-body experience, because you're out in this thought form realm where, virtually anything goes. Anything we've ever thought of exists somewhere in these occult planes. And so there's this layer of fantasy that is very much kind of like an evolving movie line, and it's incorporated over the decades. It started to incorporate more and more things. It's like there's this Star Wars kind of theme, and like good versus evil, and this war in heaven, which is a very ancient idea, the war in heaven. That's like from biblical times. And we've been elaborating on this war in heaven idea, and it's actually playing out in this kind of astral bubble fantasia. And that's where people start tapping into this stuff about, a lot of this stuff, don't go into the light, we're in a prison, it's a trap, this kind of thing. And you can sort of see that people they're kind of being misled and manipulated in a sense, because they're tapping into this layer of the unconscious where it's like, if you conceptualize the collective unconscious as a being or an entity, and my friend Nick Sandbrook refers to it as it has kind of like this, it doesn't want to be kind of like discovered and found out, and it also is kind of childlike at the same time. So it's got these fantasies going that it treats as real, but it uses this material, this kind of like movie script type material, to mesmerize us and beguile us and distract us with all these incredible, notions and fantasies. And it's very, very tempting a lot of the time, and very easy for us to fall into these little rabbit holes and get sucked into it and end up hypnotized. And that's something I see happening a lot, but I didn't realize, it took me quite a long time to see that layer of it. Because if you compare if you look at the near-death experience realm and that massive body of research, which, I'm quite familiar with at this point, and you look at this side of it with the more sort of, not to be disparaging, but like this more kind of paranoid astral kind of fantasia where they think that, you shouldn't go into the light because it's a trap. There's a chasm between the two of them. And it's like, okay, well, how do you reconcile that? And it's the only real way to do it is to start understanding that I'm explaining this in my own sort of idiosyncratic fumbling way, but there's two layers. It's like there's the NDE stuff, which is actually giving you deep levels of experience that filter out all the sort of astral fantasia, anything goes type stuff. And then you've got that layer there, which is this bubble that we're all in. And we're all fueling it all the time. We're constantly adding material into it. Like, we talk about something, like the Archons and the Gnostic mythology suddenly comes onto everybody's radar. And then you've got all these minds pumping this energy and these thought forms and ideas into the collective unconscious layer. And it's soaking it up. And it's like, okay, well, I'm going to start feeding this back to you now. And you're going to start having experiences that support this belief structure. And, I'm going to hypnotize you with this. Because you seem to like it, and you seem to want me to play like this, so I'm going to do that. And so it's a weird feedback loop that we're in. But there's two very different worlds there that kind of have to be separated, I think, and that's a very interesting kind of a discussion in itself.
Well, you were on a roll. That was really good stuff. I mean, let me break it down. Then you're basically saying that there's a kind of pop culture version of what happens with the death experience. And then there's all of this data that's been collected by near-death experience researchers that you would suggest, or you are suggesting, is much more credible. And that this is just a natural process that happens when we take away all the pop culture.
That's a really good way of putting it. That's exactly right. And pop culture is the right word, because if you look at the realm of contact experiences and abduction experiences with what people are calling aliens and this kind of thing, a lot of it can be characterized as visionary type experiences. But you'll see there are actually some really well-known examples, and I'm just trying to think of the woman's name now. It's not coming to me, but a famous American lady who had an experience where she was abducted by what she saw as aliens. Some small grays and some bigger ones, and some Nordic-looking types. And then I think there was some talk by the aliens about Jesus at some point. They supposedly believed in Jesus. But you can see there's this mishmash of like archetypes and thought forms starting to come together in the realm of visionary experience. So it's sort of like you need to take a step back from the visionary experience and look at it from a more meta, symbolic, mythological level, because that's kind of what it is. It's a mythological level. You're tapping into the collective unconscious layer of kind of like all the stuff that we've ever thought up, conjured up, imagined, been afraid of, all the fantasy stuff, all the Star Wars stuff, all the superheroes, and it's all there in this sort of bubble. And this woman's experience, which was what I wanted to go back to with the pop culture thing, with those types of experiences, in some instances, and definitely not all of them, and I'm not a debunker at all, like there's definitely something very interesting happening there, but a lot of those experiences have been found subsequently to be seeded by ideas in pop culture. And then whether it's, through the mind of the individual themselves, who they've encountered something in pop culture that has then gone into their subconscious, and it's been reproduced and projected out in a visionary type experience, years down the track, or, it's just something they've tapped into in the collective, like the Jesus thing. And now Jesus is he's got believers and acolytes in the alien races, it's because it's all coming together. It's all kind of coalescing. And
just all right with me.
Say again?
Jesus is just all right with me.
Yeah, exactly.
Isn't that the Doobie Brothers?
Maybe. So yeah, it's an interesting one.
So, gosh, there's just, I mean, the tendrils of this conversation are massive. Okay, let me give you a quote, and then I want to give a funny quote that of my own, and then I want to ask a question. So, Carl Jung said, "Knowing your own darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people." I've been looking into all this wonderful content by Kelly Brogan, Dr. Kelly Brogan, on spiritual bypass, and so I'll put a link to some of her one of her articles on spiritual bypass, which is basically what's happening with all of these goody two shoes leftists who are willing to sacrifice your individual choice for the alleged good of the herd or whatever. So now my quote is from my book. It's a book of satire called The Angel's Dictionary that you kindly reviewed years ago. I published it in 2017, and I defined shadow side thus: noun. So shadow side, noun. Self you encounter when you do not look in the mirror.
I like that.
Right. So is it the collective shadow self?
Yeah, essentially.
That really sheds a lot of light on it. What you've said going into my question, because now you can begin to see how the shadow self takes form and how it evolves or changes and how it operates.
Yeah, exactly. And it does change. It keeps up with the times.
That is really, really fascinating. So let's talk about the politics of shame now that we've mentioned spiritual bypass and how that's working on a collective level. I would like listeners viewers to know that Brendan is a facilitator of the Regenetics method, which is an energy healing technique, a DNA activation technique that I developed with my partner Lee, and he was one of the early facilitators that we taught how to do this work, and he's been doing it for years now, and it does a wonderful job. So if you're interested in Regenetics, I encourage you to go to Brendan's website and connect with him and let him do it for you, because it's pretty amazing stuff. I mean, I'd love to get some of your current thoughts on the work, but in Regenetics, there's this concept of the fragmentary body. Eileen McCusick called it the slavery yoke. You've written an article about it. I'll try to remember to put a link about the fragmentary body in the show notes for the article you wrote about it. But here we are with what I view it as a kind of hole in our subtle anatomy through which foreign entities like archons or etheric parasites or whatever you want to call it can actually get a grip in us, in our minds, and maybe it's the shadow side doing that. Maybe it reaches in there and it gets a hold of you in some strange way, because you wrote about the experience of sealing the fragmentary body through Regenetics as a way of kind of not only raising your energy and your kundalini, but of increasing your ability to stand up for yourself, to speak your truth, and to release things like this collective shaming that's going on. I'd love your thoughts on that rambling question.
Would you want to hone it down a bit for me?
Yeah. Do you see utility in doing potentiation, for example, which is the first part of Regenetics? Do you see utility in helping people go beyond this duality programming that's happening with the politics of shame?
Yeah, I mean, in an indirect way, like I think that the process facilitates that kind of thing, because what I see it doing is it turns people inwards to identify the true locus of the self and what is authentic for them, what is true for them, which means that, how can you continue to invest in the absolute bollocks of, all the politics and all this other garbage swirling around you if you are actually connected to what is true inside of you? Because, I mean, that whole world is this construct of make-believe and nonsense. And so, I mean, speaking of the pain body, it's like, we have a society that is very kind of like well designed in some ways to facilitate disempowerment and shame, and foster weakness and weakness of spirit, weakness of the, people having no backbone and not standing up for themselves. And I see your process as creating an internal condition that allows people to stop participating in that dynamic, and actually makes it almost gradually more and more difficult to participate in it, because it becomes tangibly so at odds with with truth and reality, because it is so fake. I mean, that whole world is absolutely fake. It's nonsense. None of it's rational or logical or based in any kind of evidence. It's like, it's so wrong.
I've been saying follow the seance.
Say that again.
Follow the seance.
Follow the seance. Yeah. And people, we're born into this indoctrination machine that really, even though it's not explicitly stated, the message of all of the like schooling and all that other nonsense that comes after it is to obey external authority figures, and not trust in yourself, not believe in yourself, not connect to yourself, and not connect to reality. And the way to connect with reality is internally through that spark of the eternal inside of you. And then once you do that, it's like game over for all the other rubbish around you.
So, that article you wrote years ago, I brought it up. It's on my website at Phoenix Center, phoenixregenetics.org. It's a timeline for Kundalini rising, energetic liberation, and answering the soul's call. And I still like that title a lot. And I think you touched on some of the major points there, where what I've observed and what you seem to have observed is that people experiencing this work tend to go through some kind of consciousness and or energy upgrade that makes them have to really sort of look in the mirror, back to the shadow side conversation we were having. And that in doing that and going inside themselves, knowing your darkness is the best method for dealing with the darknesses of other people, Carl Jung. As people do that, they can look back out at the world and then begin to see it for what it actually is, and then decide what they want to do in terms of coming to terms with it, in terms of whether to reject it or to, be like Cypher and be put back in a pod, which is very, very difficult to do once your energy is increasing. People sometimes have actually said to me, I wish I, had stayed asleep. It's made it hard. And that's usually a phase of the awakening process that I see with people going through Regenetics, which is a lengthy process. It's about 27 months if you stay right on the timeline. But a lot of stuff can happen, very quickly with this work. But it's funny. I've seen people who have, because when those eyes open up and you begin to see the world as it is, I mean, how do you see your spouse? How do you see, people that you might have trusted, colleagues, other family members? It can be a bumpy ride.
You're not wrong. You actually reminded me of, I have a beautiful little friend. Sounds like I'm talking about an animal, but she's a human lady. Back in Australia, a good friend of ours, and she, not that long ago, she was telling me off and scolding me because she had gone for a walk with her boyfriend. They were going up for a walk up, like hiking up a mountain, and at some point, like apparently the atmosphere was a little bit, maybe a little bit off, a little bit tense, a little bit quieter than normal. And at some point she just sort of stopped and turned to him and went, like, we should break up, shouldn't we? Like, it was something like that. It was just like out of the blue, like, we shouldn't be together, should we? And that was basically the end of their relationship right there on the hike up the mountain. And she was telling me off. She was like, damn it, Brendan, like, I blame your activations, because that's what happens. And I've seen this process play out. Probably you've seen it 10 times more, where someone's in a relationship that's not really authentically true in terms of who they really are, like deep down. And, you do this activation for them, potentiation, and it kicks the process off, and they start shedding illusion and they start shedding inauthenticity and connecting with the truth of who they are. And then suddenly they can't be with that partner anymore because they realize it's like, this isn't for me. This isn't right. So I've been told off a couple of times.
Yeah, it's happened to me, and it can also be with like your job, your career. It can be with all kinds of different situations. So not just a relationship. And if the movie ended right there, it would be a tragedy. Fortunately, for most people, if you fast forward 6 months, a year, their lives are like reinvented and they've met their life partner and they're really, really happy. They just had to go through this shedding, kind of this emotional detoxification process, or mental or even spiritual, and of course, sometimes physical detoxification process.
Yeah, totally, totally.
But I really see this as, obviously we know that this is not for the masses at this point in time, but the more people who manage to do this process or something like this process, the more empowered people we will have out there to counter the politics of shame, the spiritual bypassers. And I also believe that one of us is worth many of them in terms of the energy involved, so that we actually have the ability to counterbalance thousands or tens of thousands of people when we arrive at higher levels.
Yeah, I think you're right. Actually, I think there's something to that for sure. Because like you said, you are operating on a high frequency. There's a higher. It's like you're running on a different kind of fuel. You've upgraded to premium, and they're still running on like the discounted stuff. And yeah, we have a level of intent. I think there's an intentionality as well with people who are awake. They tend to live more intentionally, and as you know, like intention programs the, if you want to call it the morphic field, it programs the morphic field with information. You can program a space, you can program an empty room with information and instructions and intention. And a lot of people, most people, I would say, because of the nature of the culture or the civilization that we have, they don't live intentionally and they're just going with the flow. Whatever direction the other sheep are walking in, they just walk with them. It's like there's no intention there, and so their ability to impact things is I think similarly restricted. So yeah, it's great if we can get this work in front of more people and get more people to start tapping into what's real and authentic for them. I mean, the whole system is designed to keep you in the opposite condition. So I mean, far out, man. We can see where that's gotten us over the last 2 years. I mean, that whole propaganda machine is preying on people's internal unresolved shame, unresolved sense of inferiority, all that stuff. I mean, it just exploits it.
Absolutely. So, maybe as a way of wrapping up this conversation, I mean, I feel like we could just go on and on and on, and maybe we can do this again before too long, if you'd be amenable to that.
For sure.
But what are your thoughts on the awakening and what's happening, and what are we looking at here in the next year, 2 years, or even the next few months for that matter? But how do you see this playing out on a global scale? Obviously, we have a real attempt to subdue, depopulate, and control humanity going on. So where are we in this fight, or is that a bad word to use? I mean, the sacred masculine in me really wants to use the word fight because that's what it feels like. But the sacred feminine in me wants to say, no, this is more of a wu-wei situation. And if you want to call it fighting, let's maybe just call it Aikido.
Yeah. I like that. Yeah, I lean more in I mean, as much as this might sound odd for people who've known me for years, like I lean more in the latter direction now. And I think that, firstly, I've heard from a few different people who analyze, like astrological charts and numerology and things, that the timeline for things really, really materially changing in terms of getting through this taking the boot off the face of humanity. Humanity is probably somewhere from 2024 to 2026 where we actually really have the turning of the tide. Which is maybe not the best news because, far out, man, I've had enough, and I'm sure most people have.
Yeah, right on.
Yeah, it's just like what I see though is that this process is some version of the process that millions and millions of people needed to either wake up and take responsibility for themselves and their lives and their thoughts and beliefs and their health, obviously. Or just basically be stomped on and depopulated. And so we've seen we've seen both happening in pretty high numbers. And I think that this is a sort of, in some way, from a high level, it's like an organic kind of an event, even though it's obviously at a ground level, it's highly, highly manipulated and contrived. There is no virus, for example, but it's a necessary part of the evolutionary unfoldment of humanity for where we're at right now, and trying to grasp at or move up to that next octave of beingness where we can be sovereign, self-ruled beings who are autonomous and in charge of ourselves. But it takes this kind of like trial by fire sometimes to push people in that direction. And a lot of people will not go in that direction under any circumstances whatsoever. So there's always going to be that percentage of the population who's going to, want to wear a mask forever. But there's also the ones who are going to, come over to this side where it's like, oh, you know what, I don't believe this stuff anymore. I'm going to think for myself here. I've looked at the evidence and it doesn't make sense. Like this kind of thing where we take ownership of ourselves. So I see that happening more and more. Like I think we may slowly be approaching the S curve. Like we've got heaps of momentum all around the world in terms of protests and convoys and all this stuff happening, right? So there's a popular groundswell of activism happening, which we've never seen ever. And the reason for that is because we've never ever seen a global scam on this scale before. And people are starting to rebel against it and take a stand. So we need structural change to come from that. And that's going to take longer. Like, doing a protest isn't much good unless there's some kind of structural shift in the world of, politics and, finance and all that kind of thing. Like we need to drain the swamp and this type of stuff. So I see the next 12 months, maybe 2 years, hopefully not that long, as potentially being, pretty bumpy and pretty chaotic, because I don't think that this death cult is going to, they're clearly not going to give up without a fight. Like it's going to be, they will have to be removed. They're not just going to lay down and say, oh, well, we gave it a shot, like
Right.
That's just not, it's not on the cards. So I hope it doesn't last until 2026, like some people are suggesting. But I don't know, and I don't think anyone does, because the wild card is the individual. The wild card is the individual stepping out of collectivism and taking ownership and growing up and stopping living like an infant and becoming, what they're supposed to be, which is a functional, spiritually aware, awakened, empowered adult in a human meat suit.
Well and truly stated. So speaking of cards, have the globalists overplayed their hand?
Well, I think it kind of, yeah, in a sense, like, they've done something that has forced people to wake up and recognize that they're actually there and that they exist and that they're the puppet masters pulling the strings. And, like it's sort of this weird situation. Like we didn't want this to happen, but it had to happen. It was necessary. And we didn't, it's a weird thing to watch them try so hard to put the boot down, and then in the process they come unstuck because they're so, like, we've never seen them so overt and so flagrantly public in their desire to control and tyrannize people and this kind of thing. So I think in that sense they're exposing themselves and they have overplayed their hand, and that's gonna bite them in the butt over the next 2 or 3 years, I think, big time.
So speaking of the next 2 or 3 years, I recently did an interview with Bear Lando. I think he was on your podcast at one point. Is that true?
Yeah, he's good.
He's a really interesting fellow. And the podcast was titled Surviving and Thriving Through the Great Awakening here at the end of Kali Yuga. And I was sharing with him a 2017 article from which of the, it's not Nexus, it's the other one. There's another really big.
New Dawn?
Sorry?
Was it New Dawn?
Yes, it might have been New Dawn. I think it was New Dawn. Yes, cool. that I believe that's what it was. And so it was an Indian scholar writing about the end date of the Kali Yuga. And it was the most compelling article on the subject I've ever seen. And he concluded with, just copious citation and very, very astute reading between the lines of certain situations, that the end of Kali Yuga is 2025.
Okay. All right.
So the timing would be perfect. Now, one issue is that there's a kind of twilight of Kali Yuga that goes on for about 300 years, according to this way of looking at things. So it's not, as if we can expect the world to change overnight, unless there is some kind of discontinuous event this go round. Who knows? It's at least possible. I believe in, the potential for, as Bruce Lipton would put it, spontaneous evolution. So, I'm open and hopeful in that sense. So listen, we have covered an amazing amount of material, and we've gone down some really interesting rabbit holes. I'd like to just give you the opportunity to share, to reiterate any of your contact information, and to let people know what other projects besides the new book you might be working on, or if you want to give people a kind of ETA and when that book might show up, or, I don't want to, make you say something you will regret, when when the book inevitably takes longer, as books do.
Yeah. as you will know. My intention is, because this year is actually, believe it or not, I can't believe I'm saying it, but it's the 10-year anniversary of book one.
Amazing. I remember, reading that to give it a review and to help with a little bit of the editorial stuff. And it was, I was out in Palm Springs, California, and it just seems like a lifetime ago. I'm in Florida now, so.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm hoping, my intention is this year, and I think I haven't had an opportunity to write since the baby was born until now that we're here in Mexico. I know, right? It's funny how kids just, I thought I was going to have heaps of free time.
Right.
But my intention is to have it done this year. So it's like the 10-year anniversary, and then we do book two as well. And I'll do a revised version of book one as well. So I hope people lock it in the back of their minds that book two is something that, so I think it's going to be a little bit special. I don't want to talk it up too much, but I think it's going to be good. And, if they're wanting to, if they've had enough of, the censored platforms and stuff, we've always got truth.network, which, is free of censorship, which Amy and I started back in 2018 after Facebook lovingly shut down our Facebook page.
Yes, I remember.
So yeah.
So kicked me off, and Twitter kicked me off. So, it's a badge of honor at this point.
It really is. So yeah, I think a lot of people are, have had enough of those types of places. And it's if they want to follow me on, whatever social platform aside from Truth, you can look up Brendan D. Murphy Official. And what am I forgetting? Truthaverse.com is where the podcast is. Right.
And are you planning on getting on Truth Social when that kicks off? This is the new Trump platform that's supposed to happen soon.
I can't believe you called it Truth.
I know. I wanted to talk to you about that. It's like, stole your word, man.
I know, right? If only I
TROOTH.
Yeah, TROOTH. Yeah. Well, I don't know. I'm spread pretty thin. I'm just going where where it's functionally, pragmatically useful at this point.
Right. Yeah, I'm the same way. I think I'm gonna start an account there and see what's happening. I anticipate that there will be a lot of activity and a lot of craziness, but who knows?
Yeah. I'm sure it'll be interesting to start with.
Well, I hope you will give Amy my best, and maybe we can. I look forward to actually meeting you guys one of these days. We've had one of these digital relationships for a very long time, and maybe we can get you up to Florida when these crazy mandates go away.
Yeah. I hear Florida's relatively laid back about it at the moment.
It's probably the freest place on planet Earth at the moment.
Yeah. It's kind of gone on my short list of other options aside from Mexico. So yeah, I'd like to get up.
If you ever want to come up here, let me show you around. We have a guest room. You could hang out and see if you like it here. It's very cool and laid back, and hopefully it will be going into the future. So it would be fun to share this place, which I've really come to love. And I'll take you out body surfing, man. We'll catch some waves. Well, I live right across from the beach, so it's really nice.
Awesome. That sounds good, man. All right, deal.
Yeah, so we're on for that, and I'll get you the information about this video when it's up and ready to be shared and all that, and you feel free to share it if you wanted to in your world, and we'll go from there.
Awesome, mate. Thank you. I'll be sure to share it around when I get the nod. Thanks for having me on, dude. It's been great fun.
Oh yeah, well, thanks for being on. It was a lot of fun, and I love you, brother, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
Likewise. All right, man. Take care.
Take care.
See ya.